Hello, my name's Gabby Logan and I'm delighted to say we're about to have an in-depth conversation about the menopause, all things pertaining to it, from emotion and mood to the physical manifestations to the way it makes us feel around the workplace, our colleagues and our family and friends. And I have wonderful guests for you today. So introduce yourself please, Dr. Harper.
So I'm Dr. Shazadi Harper and I'm a menopause doctor and GP.
And Nadine.
Hi Gabby.
Nadine Baggot, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I've been a health and beauty journalist for 30 years and we've met before in my days at Hello Magazine, and now I'm an Instagrammer, sort of digital journalist and YouTuber, and I am 58, so I'm through and out the other side. I can speak with experience.
Excellent, because there is so much to talk about. The first thing, though, is the myths, you know, the kind of mistruths that we hear about menopause. Tell me the kind of things that you hear that kind of, you know, raise the alarm bells.
Well, I think one of the things is that often people think it's just hot flushes and sort of much older women. And I think that's the thing, that probably is the first myth to kind of sort of dispel, because you know, the symptoms start sort of earlier than you think. You know, they can start in your early 40s. And I think it's much more than hot flushes. There are 34 symptoms actually of perimenopause and menopause. And often it can be anxiety, low mood, insomnia. So I think what I would like to dispel is that myth that it's just hot flushes. It's a lot more than just that.
Absolutely. And you said the word perimenopausal there as well.
Yes.
We'll get back to that, because it feels as we discuss this area more, we're learning more vocabulary. And I'd never heard the word perimenopausal until about a year ago. So Nadine, what do you hear that is a myth you'd like to bust?
Well, one of the things that I've noticed is in the 10 years that I went from being perimenopausal, so I started my perimenopause when I was probably about 47 or 48. And then I went through my menopause at exactly the time that is supposed to be the cliched time, so between 50 and 51. And then I've noticed that one of the things that's happened is the conversation has grown, and I think that can only be a good thing. When I was 48, so only 10 years ago, nobody really talked about it. And then a few little books sort of popped up and people started having conversation. And that's when I realized I was perimenopausal. And I think also because we're such a youthful generation, we sort of think, can't possibly happening to me. That's something that happens to older women. And then I realized that by literally having a conversation, opening up and speaking to my friends, I realized that we could be in this together and we could kind of form an army of shared information. And information is power.
So what's going on to our bodies?
Well, I think Nadine sort of hit the nail on the head, thinking that we're such a youthful generation that we think that it can't possibly be us. And the menopause is not just an event. It's not one day. It's not suddenly that your periods stop and you don't have symptoms and that's the only time that you're going to experience. So the perimenopause is that journey leading up to your last menstrual period, and that can last for about sort of 4 to 10 years. On average, for most women, it starts around the age of 47, with their last period being at the age of 51. So those symptoms can start to creep up on you, and often it can be you're a busy mum, you're working in your career, and you're juggling lots of things, so you don't really realise. It can have this insidious onset. You can feel tired, and you might put it down to your lifestyle. Your periods become a little bit shorter in their cycle, and that's usually the first signs of early perimenopause. And women still don't clock onto it until maybe 1 month they've had 2 periods in 1 month, because their cycle is shortened. Then it becomes a bit irregular, maybe heavy, maybe light, and then you get those other symptoms alongside it, in parallel to it, like night sweats, feeling warm in the night, sticking your feet out underneath the duvet, the hot flushes. But I think the things that I sort of worry that women don't know so much about is those mental health and well-being side of things, that loss of confidence, the loss of memory, feeling anxious when you've never been an anxious person before. I mean, I'll say that for my part, that's one of the symptoms I experience. You know, I'm not an anxious person. I'm a doer, a coper. So all of those things are going along and happening at the same time that your life might be taking off. You might be hitting the pinnacle of your career, and it impacts on your relationships, on your children, on your work. So it's a journey, and it's a journey that can start from your 40s and last for up to 10 years, if not longer sometimes.
Last for 10 years. So when you say the last period is your menopause, what happens after then that makes it go on?
So at that time, so the point is that your ovaries are the organs that produce estrogen and progesterone, and we know they kick in around puberty, they give us our sort of lumps and bumps and curves. Because your periods end at one point doesn't mean that your ovaries stop all of a sudden. So those symptoms can still linger on, and the symptoms are due to those fluctuating levels of estrogen gradually declining. So even when your periods have stopped, that post-menopause, you can still have symptoms because gradually your ovaries are stopping functioning and not producing those hormones.
And raising awareness is obviously what this conversation is about. It's what is happening more and more, I think, through society. And there are some people who still feel that it's a conversation that shouldn't happen. People surprise me, actually. People that I would have thought would be very relaxed with it. And I think it's because it's associated with getting older, and therefore you're almost admitting that you're getting older, and somehow that's a sin.
It's interesting, isn't it? My friends are divided. There are friends who want an open, honest conversation, who readily admit how old they are, and sort of embracing the journey of getting older and the power that can come with going through the menopause and out the other side. And then I've got some friends who are sort of sitting slightly on the fence and don't really know, and then I've got 2 or 3 friends that just don't want to talk about it. They don't want to think about getting older, they don't want to think about all of those negative connotations, sort of being dry and grey and shriveled and atrophied and all those things, that word atrophy again. But actually, being in denial, I think, is a mistake, because you can literally alleviate all those symptoms simply by asking for proper medical help. I remember my mother going through it on reflection, but she never spoke about it. She was never honest and open about it, and I think her generation were very stoical about it.
Bit of shame as well, almost.
I really, I don't know. I think for my mother it was simply a case of just get on, and she was a busy working woman with 2 teenagers.
But do you think the connotation perhaps historically as well is that, obviously we are kind of bountiful when we're ready to have babies, and that's when we're supposed to be at our most attractive, or that everybody's, kind of wants to procreate with us, and then the idea that actually when that all shuts up shop, what's your purpose? Who are you? What are you here for? Whether it's subliminal or whether it's a societal kind of impression.
I definitely think that's how society sees you, as being slightly sort of less useful in life. And I actually remember the moment that a doctor first identified what I was going through. And I will be really transparent. I was sitting in an aesthetic doctor's surgery, chatting to her, interviewing her about some new laser. And she said to me, are you okay? Do you have flu? I said, no, why? She said, because you've just gone really sweaty and hot, and you sort of slightly panicking, taking my jacket off. And I said, oh no, it's just, and it had happened at night, and it had never happened to me in the day. So I had this sort of hot sweat during the day. And luckily enough, I was in a doctor's office, and she said, right, let's do some bloods. Come on, don't be ridiculous. You're an intelligent, engaged woman. Stop being in denial. What's going on? And she took some bloods, and within a week, I'd come back and she said, yep. Right, you're in this. What are we going to do about it?
Right.
We're in this together. I can help. You don't need to suffer. You don't need to be alone. You just need to be honest and open on this journey moving forward. And actually what I've done in the 10 years since is I've made sure I've gone out of my way to talk about my journey with my younger friends, so that when they know it happens to them, they'll be empowered and they'll know what to do, because there's so much help out there.
And once you know, you feel a lot more reassured. Well, this is a stage I'm going through.
50% of the population are going to go through the menopause. Come on now.
I think you confirmed this for me when we were chatting earlier, that in your medical training to become a GP, there is no menopause day. There's no.
I was so shocked when I heard.
Well, there wasn't, but I think nowadays there is more so now, and that was one of the reasons why I chose to do.
But many of us will be seeing doctors trained a long time ago who didn't have to do any menopause.
No,
training.
and that's one of the reasons I chose to do what I wanted to do, because when I was a younger GP and I'd see all these women coming in over the age of 45, and I'd be thinking, what's going on with these women? Why do they keep coming back again and again? And I thought, I didn't want to be that woman at that age. So maybe there was an element of selfishness of going into the menopause field. I didn't want to go grey in the sense of dull or lose my sparkle at that age. And so, I thought I'd like to be that doctor that joined the dots up for women. So yes, I mean, now they are getting that training, even in schools now from September this year, that it's being taught in schools. So, for men and for women, and hopefully, the younger generations, they'll be much more aware of it, and maybe the younger doctors, I think they definitely will be more aware of it.
What would you say if somebody's watching this thinking, right, well, what changes do I need to adopt in my life to make this a more pleasurable period?
Well, I think that's a really good question, because I think this is the time to be proactive and think about your future, your health, moving forward into another 40 years, potentially, maybe even 50. So exercise is really good. It really helps to release those happy neurochemicals in the brain, so helps with mood, helps with energy, and also with your memory. And we know that exercise works really well, even after you've done it for a number of hours. And also we're losing muscle at this time. It's called sarcopenia.
It's so much harder to retain muscle.
Yes. Yeah, and that's the thing. So often, even slim women will say, I might fit into my clothes, but, I just feel a little bit more flabby, or less toned.
They just don't look the same.
Yes. So it's really important to exercise and to look at your diet from a cardiovascular point of view. Think about a colourful diet, Mediterranean diet. Cut out those sugars, refined sugars. Cut out those carbohydrates, cut out alcohol or reduce alcohol at least, and stop smoking. So really have a look at those areas in your sort of lifestyle that you can make those changes.
Things you could get away with in your 20s.
Yes.
You literally read my mind there, because I was going to say that the most, once I got my hormones in check by seeing a hormone clinic, the most profound change for me was that I could no longer metabolize alcohol in the same way. And to find out that that had a hormonal reason made me feel a little bit better. And actually that was the most profound difference I made to my life. I gave up pretty much drinking most of the time, and actually I feel so much better for it.
Let's talk skincare specifically, and what is going on in the market in terms of people realizing, the scientists who come up with all the combinations of skincare, the companies that then, ask them to do that. Is there more energy being focused on finding products that help specifically women who are in that period of life?
Absolutely, and it's what Dr. Harper mentioned earlier on, and the simple truth is it's because women over the age of 45 and specifically over the age of 50 are now the majority. So there are more people over the age of 50 as of 2020 than under 50. And companies are smart. They realize that if they create a specific range of products targeted to that age group, the chances are they're going to sell. And 10 years ago, that conversation wouldn't have been had publicly. You go onto the Vichy site now, and it will tell you if you're menopausal, if you're this age group, this is what's happening to your body, this is what's happening to your hormones. That's also reflected in your skin, and this is how we then create a range specifically for your skin. But I think it's comforting to know that there is a range specifically for you, and it has all of the hydrating ingredients you need, so hyaluronic acid, ceramides, glycerin, all those things that lock water into your skin, because that's what's losing as you get older, that's what's being lost from the skin. But also things like salicylic acid to give you better glow if you've got kind of a bit grey and a bit dull. But I think the important thing for me is that we are having a conversation within health and beauty that is owning the fact that we're going through this change in our life, and we are creating products specifically for that journey. Everything that Dr. Harper has said that you would do for your own sense of health and self, I would recommend for your skin as well. So the things that we know that age the skin are, we know that sugar ages the skin, we know that sun exposure ages the skin, we know that smoking ages the skin. Those three things are super important to try and cut back. And I'm not saying don't eat sugars, but if you can sort of opt for the slow release sugar, so rather than the bag of sweets, healthy fresh fruit and vegetables are the way to go. I've never smoked, luckily, and I actually was never a heavy drinker, but I just couldn't drink red wine, white wine, champagne anymore, and things like that. Some people go through life, I have friends that have gone through life that have had zero symptoms. They sailed through their menopause with ease. And I think, and I don't want to speak out of turn, I think this is the one we need to have a conversation with our parents, our mothers, because I think it's the way you react to the menopause tends to be hereditary. And that was the moment I sat down with my mum and I said, how long did you go through this for? Because I think it's really important. And some people, as I said, sail through it. I'm very much following my mother's pattern through the menopause. A strong genetic link?
So, I often say the link is more with earlier menopause. If your mother went through an earlier menopause, then you have a higher chance of going through an earlier menopause. When it comes to us as women, I think a lot of us are living quite different lives to our mothers. And I think, women do, a quarter of women do sort of have not that many symptoms or sail through. But I think nowadays, as women, we have much busier lives, working, juggling, lots of things. So I don't think it quite follows your mother, because I think, you know, we are very different from our mothers. You know, if I look at my mum, you know, she's had 8 children, I've only had 1. So, and even compared to my sisters, I have 5 sisters. I'm the one that has the PMS type symptoms. They don't tend to. So when it comes to earlier menopause, I think it's important to check in with your mother, because...
And what would be classed as early menopause?
So 5% of women naturally go through menopause under the age of 45.
That's early.
So that's a natural early menopause. And 1% of women will go through it under the age of 40. So 1 in 100 women. And if you're a younger woman and you're thinking about having children, you know, at some point, then maybe it's a good question to ask your mother, so you can plan your, you know, do your family planning accordingly. Because I think it is important to know that you might be at a higher risk of going through an earlier menopause.
Do you feel that we are having more conversation, more dialogue about this than other cultures, or are there other countries in the world and places that seem to be ahead of the game?
I've noticed a big difference. As I said, I started my menopause virtually exactly 10 years ago, and I know when I stopped taking my HRT that I'm still getting some symptoms if I stop taking my HRT now. So I'm still on the end of that journey, and I've noticed a profound movement within the last 10 years. So I think that when I started out at 48, I was incredibly lucky. I was a journalist, I knew lots of brilliant doctors, I had help. But when I spoke to my sister and my friends, they didn't. They were a little bit lost. They only had their GP, and there wasn't an open conversation. I think 10 years down the line, women like yourself have literally taken the bull by the horns. So many TV presenters and journalists and people in power and influence have spoken about their journey for the first time. And so people don't feel alone. I feel the conversation is building, and that can only empower people. So I feel that there's less stigma involved now.
Because we mentioned, or you mentioned earlier on as well, Dr. Harper, about husbands and partners coming in. You know, there are so many people around you in your world who are affected by whether it's your mood swings or you feeling, you know, your self-esteem being crushed. And so for them to understand that this is a transient period, this is not the end.
And that you will come out the other side. I'm very much somebody that gets through whatever happens in their life by researching it to the nth degree. I'm a typical journalist, and then writing about it and then speaking about it. And so many of my friends have said, you're the first person I know that's talked about what you've been through, and I can feel it happening to me now, and thank you so much. And as I said, you're a perfect case in point. On your podcast, you've had so many women speaking about it. That would have been unthinkable 5 or 10 years ago. So now I think most people are much more open and honest about their journeys, and I think that can only be a good thing.
I think a lot of changes have happened, and I agree. I think, Gabby, it's sort of your generation of women who maybe, you know, sort of 20 years ago, I'm not saying you were that ladette culture, who are now coming to that end of their reproductive life. They're in perimenopause, menopause. People like Zoe Ball, Jo Wiley, you know, openly speaking about their symptoms and their treatments. And I think also, from a medical point of view, you know, when I started at medical school, it was probably, I was the first generation where we were starting to be 50-50, men and women at medical school. So I think those women are also coming to that end, or that point in their lives. And so there are more doctors, female doctors, who want to become menopause doctors, who want to sort of help other women. And so I think there are lots of changes going on. Women in workplaces, we're looking at how do we sustain women in workplaces, inclusion, you know, in diversity, you know, sort of those aspects as well. So I think a lot of things have happened in a very positive way for women in the last few years. And I think the more sort of public women that speak about it, Michelle Obama, she spoke about it only a couple of months ago. And I think then people say, well, actually, yeah, that's me. And some of the symptoms, they may not have had them. Somebody may be talking about joint aches. Michelle Obama talked about her low-grade depression, you know, sort of coming out of the car with a hot flush. And I think it's really nice to hear women talking about it. I mean, Jo Wiley talked about her brain fog and that how she went on to HRT when she was going to take over the Radio 2 show. So I think the more and more that women are talking about it, the more I think it can only be for the good. The other hormone that we haven't really talked about much is testosterone. And as women, we all have testosterone. Often we think of it as a male hormone, but it halves from the time that you're 20 to 40. So those levels have depleted too. And it's a hormone that gives us energy, drive, you know, it sort of gives us a boost to our libido. And it is actually in the guidelines.
It's interesting, just this morning, there was an article about a Norwegian professor who had done this study saying there's the passion and drive drops off a cliff at 54. There's no passion and drive for men and women, he was saying, but particularly women, it drops off. Obviously for men, of course, it carried on a bit longer.
Of course.
It was a male professor. But their testosterone naturally is a little bit higher, obviously, well, a lot higher than women. So testosterone is also linked to that kind of feeling of, I can still do things, I can still set a YouTube channel up, I can still go on and create.
And we were chatting, weren't we, earlier, that I take estrogen, progesterone, and a very low level of testosterone. And when I was first prescribed it, I was like, why do I need testosterone? It's a male hormone. And I remember my doctor saying to me, you notice that in the Pilates class you feel a little less stronger, or you're a little less muscle tone, or you take longer to recover from an exercise session. How's your sex life? Okay, not as good as it was in my 20s. Don't you worry, testosterone will fix that. And absolutely, that perfect blend of the three hormones working in harmony fixed it all. As I said, it was like bringing back my true self to me. And that's exactly what you as a doctor do for all of your patients.
I mean, I often think it's that missing piece of the jigsaw for a lot of women. Women still want to feel sexy walking down the street, and they want to get their mojo back. And also from the physical aspect, from their muscle strength, we talk about stamina, exercise, and sex isn't just a physical act. It's intimacy, it's communication, it's bonding. After sex, there's a release of oxytocin, which is our bonding hormone, and orgasms are good for you. I often say use it or lose it. It improves the blood circulation into the vagina, which keeps it healthy.
So obviously testosterone will help that. The other hormones help a range of other things. Together, collectively, they've been called HRT,
yes.
right? Which has this kind of negative history, doesn't it?
Yes.
And people often don't want to go down that avenue because for some reason they feel it's almost giving in, or it's going to lead to potential cancer. So dispel some of those myths for us.
Yeah, I think some women do think, we've got to go through it naturally. But
tough it out.
Yeah, tough it out.
For 20 years.
well, 30 years, even more so. And so I think they don't realise the benefits of it. They also don't realise that those negative images, myths that have been bandied around for those years, aren't necessarily applicable now. We have much safer, nicer forms of HRT. There is a lot that we can do for ourselves. And again, going back to individualisation and personalisation, it's about you as a woman. It's about having an informed choice and putting those risks into perspective for you. It's a common feature why women might come in to talk to me because they've got brain fog. And, we haven't got to that point that all workplaces have got menopause policies like they may have maternity policies. And women who are going through pregnancy have it very easily mapped out for them what's going to happen. Yet at this point, women don't have that sort of those guidelines, don't really know who they can turn to in the workplace. And this is something that can keep them going, keep them enjoying their life, enjoying their work.
One of the things we were chatting about earlier, and I asked the doctor about, was how long can I take my HRT for? Over to you, Dr. Harper.
Forever. As long as you want to, as long as you need to. I mean, often I will say that we will review, maybe adjust the dose. It's always about using the safest possible dose for the most effectiveness. So what you need at 50 may not be the same as you need at 60 or 70 or 80.
Memory is interesting because actually one of the reasons I went in the first place to see somebody to get my hormone levels tested was because I found myself struggling to recall a name or a stat when I was working, and I can be on air for hours on end, and normally I pick those things up really quickly.
What's going on at this moment is that your ovaries are underactive. They're not producing those hormones. So it's one of the ways of thinking about it is, as women may have an underactive thyroid, now you've got underactive ovaries and they're not producing those levels of hormones. But so many women come in thinking that they're getting dementia. They lose their train of thought midway through a sentence. They can't remember where they're going or what they started talking about. So it's a really common thing. And so many women think about maybe getting a demotion or changing their roles or even going part-time. So Gabby, I don't want you to be doing that. If ever you're thinking that, just come and see me and we'll sort you out.
Well, for me to feel that my body had almost let me down, that my hormones had let me down, and then to have a doctor say, we can fix this. I don't understand why you wouldn't fix it. For me, it made complete sense. I did all my research. I chose the best hormone doctor I could find. And I feel now that My sister I know has gone through this on the NHS, and she's just found a brilliant empathetic hormone clinic, a menopause clinic, who've just been wonderful, and they've supported her every step of the way. I do not have a single friend, and I have friends who've had breast cancer who are being looked after with hormone replacement therapy. So that's not even a precursor to thinking, because I've had breast cancer, I can't go on to hormone replacement therapy. I have not had a single one who hasn't come back to me afterwards and said, why didn't I do it years ago? This is amazing. I have me back. I have my sense of me back.
That's exactly what I hear. I'm back to being me, you know. It's not that you suddenly become this suddenly different person, but they just find that they've got their sort of zest for life back. They look forward to the day rather than thinking about it with dread. You know, they're not questioning their purpose anymore. So I very much am that advocate that, you know, HRT is safe for most women, and, you know, you shouldn't just listen to the media, because one of the things I think, I often give this example when people say, reading the media, well, it doubles your risk of breast cancer. And I say, well, if you buy one lottery ticket, you've got a 1 in 14 million chance of winning the lottery. If you buy two, you've doubled your chances, but it's still 2 in 14 million. And so I think it's about putting it into perspective. And we're talking about relative risk rather than absolute risk. So I think we really need to educate people, or for someone to come in and explain it to them so they're making an informed decision rather than just going by what the media is saying.
Because once you are on your treatment, you're feeling better, you'll then notice, oh, I've let my kind of beauty regime slide slightly, or I've let my skin slide, I've let my hair just start to do stuff that, you know, and then you start to kind of feel good about yourself again if you kind of get back into your old habits. Because I think, you know, you can see women who, it's almost like well, this is it then, this is old age. I'd better accept it because this is what's coming.
I mean, you're not going to put off old age, but instead of it being sort of jumping off a cliff,
the mindset as well.
You've got that slow, steady ease into it, which I think that's what hormones do. They sort of take that edge off of it, so it's a much easier transition.
So one of the other things that you said to me, because I said this brain fog is what made me go and have my bloods tested, and I found that all my hormone levels were very low and needed boosting up. And when I said I was 47, you said, did you have IVF? So a lot of people watching this will have gone through some kind of, whether it's IVF or another assisted way of getting pregnant. So that has an impact as well.
Yeah, I mean, because your body's been subjected to almost like an overproduction of hormones at a particular point because IVF stimulates. And I think people think that 51 is the age that you go through menopause, but there are variations. I touched on the fact that I'm of Southeast Asian origin, Pakistani origin. You know, we tend to go through it a little bit earlier. You know, the average age of menopause in India is 46 and a half. Women who've not had children tend to go through it a few years earlier. Women who are smokers tend to go through it a couple of years earlier. And that's why I think it's important to talk about it and highlight it, especially in the workplace, where maybe you don't look old or somebody may not think that you potentially could be going through it, but you might be. And I think that's why it's important to, you know, for workplaces to be aware.
I mean, you obviously see women who come to you for different ages, you know, perimenopausal, postmenopausal. Do they talk about their skin and the effect it's having?
Yeah, I mean, they very much do, because they just feel that they've aged almost overnight, or, you know, within a few months. They've noticed they've got fine lines, their skin is drier, it may well be itchy. So, I mean, I think it's really important that they have sort of targeted, specific treatment, skincare, which they feel that they can trust. And I think, you know, alongside things like HRT and the holistic side of things, diet, lifestyle, all of that really helps to empower a woman and sort of get her power back. You know, we've talked about it for that next stage of life, and to, you know, really get her mojo back.
Somebody once said to me when I was talking about hormone, I was talking about it actually with regard to athletes, because of course that's what doping is. You know, when athletes take steroids illegally, they're putting hormones into their bodies they're not supposed to, and obviously a lot of one particular hormone. And he said to me, he was a physio, and he said, oh, never tinker with your hormones. It's a bit like an orchestra. You don't want the string section to be out of kilter with, you know, with the brass section. And that always made me fearful of HRT, because that felt like you were tinkering with something that had its natural course. How do you kind of refute that?
Well, one of the things is, again, thinking about it more as an underactive ovarian state or hormone deficiency state. So it's not that you're premenopausal and you've already got your hormones up here and we're adding hormones to bring you up to here. actually what's going on is your hormones are declining. So what we're doing is giving you a bit back. So you're not quite back to that premenopausal state. So you're not going to be found out on doping. Yes, it's not one of those things. You're not suddenly going to have huge levels. It's just really giving a bit of add back is what I would say. So that's what I would say to him. You know, we're not adding to already a normal level. You're at subnormal level and we're just adding a bit back.
I would also add to that person that he's a he, so he's not going to go through this. But if he was going through this, trust me, he'd be first in the queue to take whatever would be available. And remember that your hormone doctor is the conductor of your orchestra. You're not doing this up. You're not making up your own song on the piano here. You're relying on an expert who's been medically trained to tinker
That's really important
with
as well
that.
to say that when you do go on that journey, you will have your bloods tested, you will know exactly
regularly
where you're at. It's not a case of just buying something off the shelf.
And you're not just sent away to walk away. Again, that you will be reviewed, it will be adjusted, it will be tweaked, you know, according to how your symptoms are and what or how it affects you. So, and also putting into consideration any medical changes that may happen to you in that sort of journey of life as well. So I think it's important to understand it's not just a one-size-fits-all, neither is it that you're just left to run on your own.
So it's been fascinating chatting to both of you, you know, from your experiences, both as women and also as professionals, you know, in your various areas. Give us some key takeaways that will help people to go forwards on this journey.
Firstly, I'd like to say that, you know, don't think it's just older women. You know, think about it earlier. Think about it maybe as soon as you get into your 40s. If you feel your body doesn't feel like your own anymore, or your mind doesn't feel quite as sharp or as bright. So think hormones earlier in life than maybe you might have thought so before.
I think also it's important to have a conversation and to be honest and open with your friends about this journey you're going through. And hopefully you all will have a gobby friend like me.
And a knowledgeable friend.
Well, and somebody that does their research, but somebody who literally is prepared to start the conversation and then to have that conversation both with your mother, to find her journey, and maybe even grandparents if they're still alive, but also then to younger sisters and daughters and friends. And I just think the more people you chat about it, the more you'll realise that you're not going through this alone.
And also husbands, partners, you know, workplaces you may have.
People
you know,
who know you,
yeah.
who see you every day.
Yeah, so you know, I think it's key to communicate.
And spread your net wide and far when it comes to doing your research. When I was going through it 10 years ago, we literally just had a search engine. Now I think about the books that have been written about it, the TV programs, the YouTube channels, the Instagrams, the doctors who are online, the podcasts who are online. And I think traditionally, one of the reasons that we're having this conversation here today is because the rise of social media has empowered women to have their own voice. So traditionally, big old, you know, staid media companies run by guys didn't want to talk about it. But the minute you have your generation who are really well-respected broadcasters, starting YouTube channels, talking on Instagram, chatting to doctors, starting podcasts, there's a wealth of information out there. And I think the end result is we'll all feel empowered to go through this journey together and realise that there is a light at the end of the tunnel.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dr. Harper and Nadine. It's been most enjoyable.
Thank you.